So, the season's drawing to an end and the game weeks are coming thick and fast. This means one thing: time's running out for us to make a difference to our overall ranks and ultimately to win our mini leagues. So if this upcoming blank game week has got you feeling confused and you don't want to end up another game week where you're like an angry Viltrumite that's just lost his home, give us 20 minutes of your time for us to run through how to optimize and strategize for the game week ahead. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, for fans of the show, you would know usually your man in the middle is the guy that won. Fortunately, we have a game week that is still ongoing and everybody's on tenterhooks in terms of what could happen, what couldn't happen. Bournemouth blank and both them and Leeds get a clean sheet. That could ultimately mean that whoever's third right now ends up first. And likewise, if the captains, I don't want to get into captains, but if the captains do get what they need to get, that again could have a big difference on it. Plus, the person that's most likely to win is off somewhere in the Caribbean, sunning it up at the moment. He may or may not join us. He thinks he's got it like that. But it's his birthday week, so we'll leave him to be. Anyway, you've got me for now and my glamorous or not so glamorous assistant, Guffs. Anyway, Guffmeister, how you doing?
Yes, this is the week where my season ended. That's what this week is. This is the week where it was like the nail in the coffin for me. You know, it was a final roll of dice, and when I saw that Chelsea team lineup and I saw Palmer was not playing, I knew then it was over. I just knew.
I had a near crash out myself on the back of that.
Yeah, I just knew. I was like, really? Okay, cool. And to compound that, you know, we'll get into it in the show, I'm sure, but, you know, Brighton obviously had a field day with, you know, everyone that kind of put in Brighton assets at the back, which I haven't got any.
Yep.
And that was just, you know, another sort of kick in the teeth. So FPL-wise, it was an absolute shit show yet again. And in some ways, it was a microcosm of my season, really, in one game week. In that bad choices, bad luck, and just, you know, one of those years that want to just end and finish now at this point. But
I would say one thing. I agree. Like, on the face of it, it feels like bad choices. But variance can happen, right? I mean, how do you write that in? Palmer, who hadn't been injured for a number of weeks, he'd finally started showing his fitness. Randomly, he is out. Pedro out for one game. We're told that he might be back for the Brighton game. No, out for that as well. To compound it, because I was chasing ceiling, I had Esteval as my first sub, with Kodiloglu right behind him, who is now on 16. So yes, this was my final lesson from FPL this season. The process was largely right, but chasing ceilings ultimately meant that my decision making got skewed and I went for broke with things. And clearly, if the gamble between the week were free hitters going to win or bench boosters going to win, the bench boosters was definitely one.
Oh yeah, easily.
But
And, you know,
when I look at things, I'm more upset because it would have been the first time this season that I'd got close to triple figures, and now definitely not. I was hoping against hopes that Pedro was going to make it, but I almost crashed out when I heard that Palmer was out. Bearing in mind he's my captain.
Yeah, and look, I think, you know, last week we spoke with FPL Salah, and obviously we spoke to Jonas, and they both kind of reinforced the idea that play it safe and boring and sensible, and I pretty much ignored that advice. And, you know, it was one of those game weeks for me where once Haaland scored, I said to myself, why did I not go with Haaland? Like, it's just, I instantly felt stupid. Like, obviously Haaland's the guy to go for, you know, and I think that this is a kind of a lesson for anyone out there who is in my position, who is a bit too aggressive at times. Sometimes the obvious pick is just the best pick. And sometimes the obvious pick is the pick that actually going to give you the most gains. And I think that despite all the bad choices I made with the Brighton picks that I alluded to before, if I just went Captain Haaland, I could have probably saved my game to some point. But it is what it is. We move forward. I think for me, it's just a case of just trying to get to the end now and trying to get some sort of decent score, which has been becoming very, very unlikely now. But you live and you learn, right?
Very true. Very true. Well, there are a number of game weeks left, particularly interesting ones to navigate, and there are a few curveballs that I think could still come about. This week, we know that 34 is a blank, blanking because of the FA Cup. Now, interestingly, if City win against Southampton, it probably means that they double with Bournemouth in 36. Is it 36 or 37? Or they double in 36 and then Palace double in 37. So there are some twists, depending on the chips that you've got left, that will allow you to try and optimize as best you can. But yeah, it's definitely a game week that has just passed that just leaves a sour aftertaste. But focusing on 34, I guess we need to get into looking into how the best ways are to navigate the game week. We know that the thing most people do that sends them into the wrong kind of areas is to run out and try to see what they can do to get 11 starters. And there's always the debate every season of, well, should I get 11 starters, etc. Bearing in mind the teams that we be playing, it doesn't necessarily mean that you can get the best assets from each team, especially if you haven't planned things incorrectly. So what we'd like to focus on today is, one, what the best strategy is for attacking a blank week. Two, having a look at some of the assets that are out there that are probably the go-tos for your 5 or 6 positions and seeing where that can end us with.
Yeah, I think a good place to start, I guess, in the show is to sort of piggyback off what I was saying a little while ago in terms of where we all are trying to finish right now. And, we've all got our own targets now. Some people are targeting top 1,000s and top 100,000s. Clearly, I'm not targeting those. But if we look at sort of starting, beginning of this game week, sort of where you kind of had to be, right, in order to kind of reach your targets, this is kind of where we were, right? And looking at this is, on a personal note, very embarrassing because I'm nowhere near this point. But for those watching this show, this is kind of where roughly you should have been coming into this game week, right? And, think everything's still possible, right? I mean, the gaps between each level are not huge between, the 1,000,000 and 500. And as you've really pointed to, there are still opportunities ahead with, both City and Palace have got one more game than most teams in the league, right? So there are opportunities ahead to kind of pick the right players. We'll come into obviously later in the show, but I think there are some dangers, particularly with the Palace players who are in Europe. We've already seen that they play Strand Larson against West Ham and rotated Mateta and others as well. So you have to be careful about maybe trying to overload on certain assets. But where are you? Are you anywhere near these scores? I'm not. I mean,
it's soul destroying having a look at them, to be fair. You look at number 1 spot and you think about the figures that would be required for you to get there. Yeah. Ouch.
It's a madness.
Ouch is all we can say. I mean, even for your top 1,000, even top 10,000, like you're talking about some serious points gains. That would be necessary. And the only thing that any of us have got in our hand for this, realistically, with the only 4 weeks remaining per se, 4 or 5 weeks remaining, is chip equity, right? And it's also dependent, as we've heard over the past couple of weeks with the different guests that we've had on. Different ones have different views and thought processes on the strength or the importance of particular chips. So, for instance, Jonas, he thinks that the triple captain chip is the weakest one. Not that we picked up on it at the time, but that was hurtful, because what's it mean for our podcast as the Triple Captain podcast. But that all that said, as I alluded to, it's possible that there are going to be another 2 double game weeks, which means it does open up opportunities for the bench boost. But it also gives opportunities for anybody that's got the free hit chip remaining. So it's going to be really interesting because now it becomes really technical in terms of where we can go. Now, you will have seen, Gus, that I've had a strategy out there for a while in terms of what could I do to get to a number that we will not even speak about that was shown on our other slide. But in reality, at the moment, what I'm trying to do is get into that top million. In reality, if I can do that, still puts me in the top 10% of what's in the game. Bearing in mind there's 30 million players. But it's clearly not where I'd want to be. But it is a good reminder and a benchmark to see the kind of gaps that we need to make up. And I've got a lot of food for thought with regards to what I do with the remaining chips that I've got. In reality, the wildcard chip, having it becomes less and less valuable the longer the weeks go on. So I'm almost forced into an ultimatum of using it either this week or next week. Anything after that, you're almost making the wild card become a free hit, which is not the best use of it. It should be the strongest chip, I guess, in terms of setting.
Can I ask a question, actually?
Yeah.
Do you regret not using the wild card earlier? Because, I mean, I'm asking that for 2 reasons, right? One, because, you know, I'm guessing you haven't made the gains you wanted to in the last few game weeks to kind of get into that million spot. So potentially a wild card might have done that for you. But also, do you think using the wild card, there's like some residual effect of that? So therefore, you know, you can get some impact over 4 or 5 game weeks. And now, to your point, the effect of the wild card in game week 35, which is going to be, in your case, the earliest you can probably use it, given that you're not going to use it in the blank game week, you're not going to have much residual kind of effect from the wild card. So, had you decided again? Would you do it differently next time, again, or would you do the same thing?
For the way that this season has worked out, probably not, because when I've looked over, when you go through planning and so on, there are times where I've looked at, well, what could I do to my team, etc. And because I didn't do enough in terms of value in the first half of the season, if I had wildcarded, I still would have been outside of some of the individuals that I'd wanted to have got. So the wildcard didn't make any sense. So the main lesson for me is that actually I'll pay attention to becoming Del Boy next season, whereas this season I didn't. I still think there are gains to be made with using wildcard with the last 3 weeks, but ultimately, when I do that, I've got to look at the wildcard as, you know, doing something for me within 2 to 3 weeks, because I need to use that to set me up for a bench boost. So that's the reason why it's one where you'd ideally think, well, 35 is when you do that. But then depending on what they announce around those games, if, for instance, City does double and Palace do double in 37, it may be that wildcarding in 36 to go into 37 is the right thing to do. However, like you've already mentioned, Crystal Palace are a big worry in terms of trying to load up with them. As we've seen 2 times in a row after Europe, Sarah started on the bench. Obviously, Strand Larsen, he's now kind of relegated once Mateta has come back. And in reality, Glaston's on his way out, so he has no reason to start showing any loyalty or whatever not. He just needs to get them doing what he needs to get them doing. So it's really interesting to know the ways in which we attack and the chip equity. But the most important thing at the moment is the blank game week and how we start looking at that.
Yeah, I think maybe it's good to start with the beginning, right? Which is who's playing the blank game week. And I'm sure most of the people that are watching the show are aware of this anyway. The information's out there, we're all pretty clear on who's playing, but it's good to remind ourselves about the matchups and where the possible gains lie, right? And, you know, for those that are not in tune, obviously the teams that double this game week don't play in the 34 game week. So if you haven't got your free hit in your pocket, you're coming into this week like myself with some problems to solve. Luckily for me, I kind of was aware of this and made sure that my actual main team before my free hit team, which I played this game week, was pretty much in shape, so I'm okay. But I am exposed to people playing their free hits who can load on players like Bowens and the likes of Gibbs White, who've shown a bit of form in the last couple of game weeks, which I hadn't considered coming into this game week. So looking at his fixtures, does anything sort of jump out to you, Ark, in terms of that's a great fixture to sort of look out to load upon?
So I have a feeling that there's a lot of upside in the Wolves Middlesex match. However, you be brave because this is more a feeling than it is anything else. Now, obviously, we know that Wolves are struggling and they are down. We know that from what we've been saying over the past couple of weeks, it is about finding teams at the moment that are either in form or they've really got something big to play for. Yeah. Obviously, for Middlesex, they do. What I would say is that since Dispersi has gone in there, you can see that they are creating more. Now, the issue that they've got is that they've been creating chances and they're falling to Richard. They need to fall to Solanke. Solanke is clearly a better goal scorer than Richard, but he's not the one that's getting on the end of things at the moment. I also think that Villa are always going to be interesting now as well. I alluded to this online. Their midfield is back, and now Rodgers and Watkins become assets that you can look at. And in terms of other fixtures, nothing jumps at me. It's obvious that in the main, people will be going for Bruno as captain. It's United at home. Although Brentford are no easy feat, and there's loads of narratives within that game as well, right? And Bruno will be playing them, etc., that kind of thing. Yeah, if I was looking at two fixtures for me to attack per se, the Wolves Middlesex one, and yes, I would also look at the Arsenal versus Newcastle game. Simply because Arsenal have also got something big to play for now as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think definitely the Spurs game is one to target. I mean, Spurs, it's been documented, they haven't won all year, right? And on this terrible run. But the odds would suggest that that's going to change at some point. And although Wolves have improved, second half of the season, their recent form hasn't been great. And Tottenham have to win this game. They have to win this game. And I think sometimes when a team really, really has to win a game, somehow, some way, it probably is going to happen. I think if we're looking at targets, I think probably Porro is definitely one you want to look at. Not that I think that Spurs are going to necessarily keep clean sheets, because they've always struggled all season long to keep clean sheets. But he's someone, with massive upside in terms of his attacking returns. We've seen Wolves do struggle from sort of wide players all season long. And he's someone obviously gets forward quite a lot. So he's definitely someone to look at. And I'd also look at probably Shelly Simmons. And I say this, if you got a free hit, which I don't, I wouldn't bring him into my team. So I think it's important to caveat, these choices in terms of where you sit. For me personally, I haven't got that card to play, so I'm not going to bring Simmons in for the rest of my team to play the next 4 game weeks. But just for a single game week, he's something to look at. He's got good upside. Obviously he can shoot from range. He scored last week, and I do know obviously they had Maddison back in their squad last week, so clearly he's finding his feet. Yeah, Maddison was on the bench against Brighton, so he's back in training and back in the squad. But he's been there for so long, I don't see him coming into the team and making any meaningful impact anytime soon. So I think Xavi Simons at this point is still going to be their starter and mainstay for the next couple of games.
He just always fails the eye test when I watch him. It just always comes across really weak. But like I say, you come to this part of the season and it's really about form and mentality rather than So it's about trends rather than what they've done. So if we can see that the trend or the underlying data within them and the game environment that they've got suits, then yeah, they're good to go for. So I do co-sign what you're saying here. I do think you look at their assets and you do think there are only 2 or 3 that you could really go for, i.e. him, maybe Solanke and Pora.
Yeah, and I'm also looking at Palace as well, because yes, there are some real red flags in terms of some of the rotation because of Europe, but they do have that extra game, and I think for this particular game week, Munoz is obviously an interesting one, but I do think Mateta is an interesting one. He didn't start against West Ham, so I would think that he probably will start this game. He caused Liverpool all kinds of trouble in the reverse fixture early this season. I think, from memory, I think that was the highest XG at that point from any team.
Yes, yeah. Remember the match well. I really hope he doesn't do that this week because I've got Van Dijk at the back.
And Mateta always seems to finish off seasons well. He seems to have these flurries towards the end of the season. So he's someone that is worth considering, just as a kind of a Hail Mary. He is capable on his day.
Yeah, there's that, and he's trying to play himself into the France squad as well for the World Cup.
Well, there you go, right? Obviously, Ekatike is now not in the squad, and there's a spot that's opened up, and I'm sure he'll be looking at it thinking, well, there's a spot potentially for me to fill. So if he can finish off the season strongly, then he's got every chance of making that World Cup squad, and I'm sure he's looking at that. So I would definitely look at him as well as someone to look that is very lowly owned and could be a real sort of game changer if you're trying to make big gains.
The only caveat we could guess is how much of this is adrenaline, right? He is only just back from injury. Clearly he's scored, etc. as he's come back. Will he be able to keep it up? But you can only go with form. Like I say, I'd be undoing myself if I didn't say that the form matters right now, and it does.
But yeah, I mean, you spoke about the Arsenal game, and I'm just not sure about Arsenal in terms of where you would go with assets, right? Am I confident at this point they're going to keep clean sheets? Potentially. Am I confident that I'm going to know who's going to start that game for Arsenal in terms of the attacking assets? Just don't know, right? I thought Havertz played pretty well against Man City, albeit he missed some chances. But Jokovic has been the main guy for most of the season. Will he bring in Trossard? Will he be Martinelli? There's so many kind of questions up in the air right now in terms of who's going to start that game for Arsenal that it's a difficult one to kind of load up on with Arsenal. Having said that, they do have some really good fixtures. Off the back of this game, their running's pretty good, right? It's a good game. So they are someone to watch. If you do have a wild card like you have in your pocket left over, I probably would be loading up on some Arsenal assets because they're running is favourable, right?
I guess it largely depends on who they've got coming back from injury, right? So if California is back, if Timber is back, then it makes the Arsenal defence a lot different proposition to the makeshift version that there is now. Ultimately, Eze is back and is playing now. Is he the starter rather than Trossard coming in for the left or Martinelli? And also, there's lots of rumours about Saka potentially being back either for this game week or the next, which in itself is a boost. You all know my thoughts personally, because we speak about it offline in the Arsenal groups that we are in. If it was down to me, Havertz would be the starter for the remainder of the year. I think there is a stat that for the 36 games that he has started as a striker, we've only lost 3, and I think those are favourable enough terms that I would be pushing for that to be the case. Although, to the point that you made, he does miss, right? I think his conversion is like 1 in 3 or 1 in 4, so you have to take the rough with the smooth with him. He'll either be involved in a goal or he'll score. But, you're not going to get loads of double-figure hauls from Havertz. But what you will get is a steady Eddie that brings you in stuff and will give you the occasional haul.
Yeah, I think for me, and I think again at this stage of the season, everyone's on different philosophies right now, different chips in their hand, in the pocket. Obviously, there's lots of streamers out there right now who are kind of giving you what their free hit team should look like, and I think you kind of a waste of time for us to sort of do our version because there's so many of those versions out there on the internet. But what I will say is that if you're like me and possibly like yourself, who has a wild card, isn't a wild card, and wants to sort of build their team from now going towards the end, there's two teams that I would look at. And the first team that I want to sort of talk about is Everton. And I mention Everton because, Everton's away form has been, I think, the second best in the league over last year. Although West Ham have been pretty good, Everton got a quite good record over West Ham. And they got a number of assets that I think are really interesting going forward. And the three assets that I want to sort of talk about here is Pickford, who, the last 3 years has been sort of up there as one of the best keepers in the league. And I think he's second, again, behind Raya in terms of clean sheets and points, I think. So, he's someone that is worth looking at. And Dye, obviously, he's on penalties, someone who's generally sort of involved in all good things that Everton do. And Tarkowski, who started the season really well with a lot of DEFCON points, was up there, has sort of faded a little bit as Everton kind of went into a slump, but has picked up a little bit recently. So those are sort of three assets from Everton that I would be looking at in putting your team going forward. And a fourth one as well will be possibly Dewsbury Hall, who I think is a really good asset at his price point.
Yeah, I was going to mention him. Like you say, at his price point, he's quite involved in any of the goal scoring opportunities, and he does put in a shift. And obviously, as you've outlined with Ndai, he's got various different routes to goal, and he's a joy to watch as well. He just needs to put more of his chances away. But yeah, I mean, they've got quite a mix. We want them to have better home form. That's what I'd really like from them. Bearing in mind they've got City. But yeah, Everton have done well this year, and yeah, assets.
They're chasing Europe as well. So yeah, that's another thing.
Yeah.
So. Well, it seems pretty obvious, but Man United, I think that they're the other team to watch. I think they're, it's been documented as well. Bruno Fernandes is very close to breaking the assist record, and I'm sure that that's something that's on his mind. He's clearly one of the players of the season. This season, he's been brilliant for a large part of the season. Man United, offensively, they seem to have clicked. Man United over the last sort of 3-4 months, and they're looking fresh, which shouldn't be a surprise given they were out of the conditions pretty early on. And we get to the back end of the season where teams are starting to sort of fade and be a bit tired and thinking about World Cups and whatnot. Man United are kind of coming into this stage of season looking pretty good. And I think that they'll cement that third spot. They've got a good game this weekend. I expect goals this weekend from Man United. So at this point, you haven't got Bruno Fernandes in your team. What are you doing? And I do think people like Cunha are good assets to have at this point. So those are the two teams that I'm kind of looking at in terms of potentially loading up on. If you have the transfers in hand and if you have the wild card in your pocket.
And in terms of the actual blank game week, we got any rules that we believe people should try and follow or at least stick to?
Yeah, look, I think it seems a bit like weird. Someone like me giving advice on rules, given my season, But I do think
But to that point, you probably are in a good position as well. All of us are the ones that haven't done as well as we would want to, simply because unfortunately, we have made the mistakes, right? So, in terms of the blank game week, what's the usual thing that people do? They do run for, let's try and get 11 assets in. We've looked at the fixtures. Do we see from those fixtures 11 players that we all think are going to haul? Not sure that we do. So is it more important for us to make sure that we've got a core set of players that we know do well in those game environments? That's probably where we need to start anchoring the way that we look at the game week.
I think the beauty of this game is that no matter where you sort of sit, whether you're someone who's consistently great at the game or someone like myself who's a bit up and down, we all have the best intentions, right? We all are football enthusiasts and understand who the good players are. Often the difference between the good players and the bad players is just a case of just patience and understanding how the numbers work. But when we get to this stage of the season, I think it's less about analytics. I think there's lots more that come into the melting point in the sense that we do have to sort of factor in who's on the beach, who does have to play for. We've got a World Cup year. Certain players probably don't get injured at this point. So are they playing at full steam? Certain teams are in Europe and, had their eye on the glory, like Palace, and potentially don't really care about a league position because they can be a hero for Palace or for Forest or whatever. So there's lots of things that kind of go into this right now. And I think it becomes less about analytics. And I think my philosophy, which is, let's be honest, mainly based on Phil, I think is a bit more relevant at this stage of the season. But to your point, rules, what I would say is some of the rules that you should probably follow as a player at this point is, I think you mentioned about 10 minutes ago about getting 11 players on the pitch. Chase quality, not quantity. If you have used your free hit already and you come into this game week struggling to put 11 players on the pitch, I wouldn't be taking, huge gambles right now. I would make sure you have the right players in your team. And to me, some of those players you could look at is like Bruno Fernandes, maybe Ollie Watkins, maybe a Salah if you can afford him. So there's a few players that, if you can get one or two of them into your team for this game week without taking huge hits, then I would focus on that rather than trying to focus on taking massive hits and getting 11 players on the pitch. I also would say that another thing to kind of pay attention to is to protect your captaincy. So pick the right captain. Generally speaking, no matter how bad your game week is, if you have the right captain, then you can usually salvage a decent game week. So the focus should really be on making sure you get the right captain. And if you get that right, that can almost kind of, cover up any problems you have in terms of getting 11 players on the pitch.
And in reality, what that actually means is trying to understand effective ownership and where people are likely going for that. As we alluded to previously, in all likelihood, most people will be heading towards Bruno as the captain. There is no Haaland, right? So, I mean, we will get into captain choices at some point as we get further into the episode, but your captaincy is really going to be a game changer for you in a blank game week, in a week that is expected not to be high scoring.
100%. And again, to sort of hammer home this sort of point of making big hits, I think a -4 is probably okay. I think that's something that is acceptable in a blank game week if you want to get them players in the pitch or close to it. But I think once you start getting into sort of the -8s and the -12s, you do start have to answer yourself the question, is this worth it? Am I going to get those upsides? I always feel, and I think Hots, if Hots was here, he would probably be saying, hardcore Hots, I've done -8, -12 in the past and still won game weeks. And some people will do that, but I think if you're looking at it from the chances that you get...
those are in normal game weeks.
Exactly.
I doubt he does that in a blank.
Exactly. And I think you have to pick your moments for your minuses, right? Why are you taking the minuses? Is it to chase a blank game week, or is it with a view that you're trying to get your team right for the game weeks ahead? Are you taking double the minuses because you've got a double game week and you could potentially make those big gains because it's double game week? There's reasons why you do that. In this particular game week, I don't think it makes sense to sort of go bigger than minuses personally.
To just build on your point, for me, a hit you only ever do if you can justify that hit over a 2-3 week period. There's no point taking a hit and thinking, well, that will give you a wonderful uplift for 1 week. You don't do 1 week punt minuses. So if you take a hit this week, it would be with the view for taking that player on for the next 3 to 4 weeks. And that would be on the assumption that you forecasted that player would bring you in more than the person that you're actually getting rid of. So that's the other thing for this week, as well as trying to protect your captaincy. It's also don't, for the sake of having 11 players out there, do something that means that you have to then make 2 or 3 other maneuvers. So you waste transfers just to cover this game week. That won't be useful for anybody.
Yeah, I agree totally. So I just think that you got to be sensible, right? I think that you have to just make sure that you this isn't the week to chase. That's the kind of overriding thing I would say in this particular game week. Just be mindful of that. But also, I think other sort of rules that you probably should be looking at this game week would be if you're someone like me and hasn't got their free hit, whatever players you're bringing to your team, make sure you're buying players that you still want after the Blank Gameweek. So kind of keep that in mind. I alluded to the fact that there are some teams with some decent games coming up. Arsenal is one of those teams that has decent games. Obviously, we said already that Palace have one more game and are a team to target. So just make sure you're not just kind of like focusing solely on just the game week. You're thinking beyond that. I'd also say that it's probably better to prioritize attackers over defenders generally. Although this game week, so this season, should I say, has been a bit of an anomaly in that respect. Obviously, we've seen the impact of DEFCON. So I think in previous years that probably would have been a big impact. But yeah, just play smart is what I would say.
Yep, and one of the best pieces of advice that you can chew over is not to rip up a relatively strong team. If your team is strong, but for this game week it won't particularly be, but it's survivable, then survive. Be boring. It's fine. Remember that there will be many other people that are in the same position or worse, and there will be people that will, not to have a dig at you, Gus, but there will be people that will be going for feel, right? They will be saying, oh, well, I'm going to do this, and if this comes off for me, then, I'll fly up the league, which is true. Like, if it comes off for them, they'll fly up the league. But the likelihood of that happening is less than if you hedge your bets and you're boring for the week. Like, it will mean you survive into 35, which will then give you other options in terms of what you do, and you'll have more information, so you will know, are we going to have 2 double game weeks, or are we going to try and fit everything into that one double game week? Don't I don't even know what the best term for it is, because we're not past watershed. But yes, don't go too is what I say.
Yeah. Well, let's look at captain, shall we? I mean, I think it's probably a good sort of time to have a look at that. Obviously, we've used kind of the projected points in terms of sort of listing this. Salah, interestingly, is projected to have the most points, which I find quite interesting. I mean, I know he scored the other day.
It's because his underlying data is still good. It's just it just seems like he just doesn't have that snap that will allow him to get the goals that he usually does. So I would imagine that's ultimately that's how you start forecasting. But yeah, he's up there. For me, the obvious will be going in for Bruno. It's a home fixture. It's they are third against, I don't know, like the 8th or 9th team. I mean, there's not many times that a decision jumps out and slaps you in the face as much as that would be. That said, if you are going for the chase because of where you are, remember, I think Salah alluded to this last week. He was talking about the fact that, if he finishes 600,000 or 200,000, there isn't a crazy amount of difference. So on the back of that, he would pivot to or work out, do I want to chase here, or don't I want to chase? I mean, for instance, looking at people like going for Bowen, clearly you'd be chasing. West Ham are lower in the league than the team that they'll be facing. But it's we have seen that he has been returning for the past couple of weeks, for instance. His trend is there. He's not declining. And Dye is more of is also more of a punt. But bearing in mind, we know Everton's away record. We know he's got different routes to goals, and he's a creator. He's always got to be in the mix, I guess. But like I say, my wild card is Yankee.
The interesting thing about Salah is that if you do have a free hit, you have a big opportunity, right? Because you're essentially going to have an asset that almost half of the game won't have. Because if you haven't got a free hit, you're not bringing Salah into your team. So therefore, straight away, you have a window of opportunity here to not only put Salah in your team, but to double that pain with people that don't have a free hit and captain him. And if he does get a good return, you could get yourself some big gains. Now, of course, it's a big if because Salah has been, let's be honest, trash all season long. But you would think.
I mean, that's harsh, but yes.
Well, he has been. Let's be honest. But
he has been for his high standards. But I think that's the politically correct way for us to put it.
Yeah, he's been trash. I mean, I think even Liverpool fans will say that. But the amount of home games that we'll have left is dwindling, right? And I'm sure he'd want to kind of put on some kind of show before now and towards the end of the season. And given sort of the career he's had at Liverpool and what he's given to that fan base, you would think that he wants to sort of finish in the right way. So I'm worried about Salah because I can't get him to my team. So he's someone that is definitely, if he had the free hit, would be my choice of captain. To me, it's something I should have done this game week, gone with a safe choice. And this game week, I will be going with a safe choice, and that's Bruno Fernandes. As much as I would like to chase some of those names in the list, Fernandes just gets points week in, week out. And whenever Man United do score goals, he's invariably involved. He's just such a great player right now. Playing with such confidence. So it would seem foolhardy to go against him, in my opinion.
You Bruno love. Yeah. No, but as you said, you can't take away from what he's been doing. And unfortunately, he likely is going to finish the season with the record.
Yeah, you would have thought so. So yeah, I mean, that's where we are this game week. How are you feeling about the sort of game week overall? Are you, should I say, how are you feeling about the end of the season? Are you sort of resigned to just, it's over now, rush to the end? Are you still harbouring any feelings of potentially getting to that golden 1 million and below? Where's your head at?
I need to get into the top 1 million or die trying, as they say. So I do think there are opportunities, but obviously where we are at the moment is we're actually playing against the people that are really serious about FPL. So this is not the people that have forgotten about their team, etc. So it's easy to make gains on them. And like I say, for me, there was some real big missed opportunities with my own team for this game week. Like I say, I had Esteval on my bench because I had this. The process seemed right to me in that with the Chelsea assets that I went for, and also hearing that Man United, all their centre backs were out, etc. I thought, okay, this could be put in time as they're at home, etc. That kind of thing, and they've got to go for Champions League. But it just didn't happen, and I really got a slap back in the face from variance. Palmer, Pedro, and then Esteval all out. Esteval being my first sub. Kodologlu was on my bench with 16, and if he had come in, I'd have made that the holy grail triple figures, which I haven't done now. And I think, if I'm not right, that ultimately the game week has gone to Hot. I think he's won it by about 2 or 3 points, which again is frustrating. But also, I'll allow him to explain. But I would imagine that he's mega frustrated at the moment as well because his game week didn't go to plan, although he has won it amongst us three. But in terms of your question, yes, I will keep going. I'm on that hamster wheel, and we go again, as they say.
Yeah, just to say my point in this game week, I've just seen the scores come in. And just to kind of like add and compound how shit this has been for me, Hill, who put my team, gets an own goal. Thank you, Hill. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Like no clean sheets and an own goal. Well done, mate. Well done. So yeah, that just kind of, underlines how what a joke it has been. But yeah. It is what it is, man.
I think I've ended up on 96. But definitely the bench boosters were the big winners this week. I've seen loads of scores of 130 and beyond, which is upsetting, as it's not for my good
Well, I had Gross on my bench. I had Gross on my bench with 16. I had Van Heck on my bench with 13. So yeah, a bench boost would have really, really given me a good score this week. But yeah,
But like I say, there are opportunities coming. There are opportunities coming, definitely. So it'd be interesting to see what the final couple of weeks can get. But yeah, definitely be back to the drawing board. Although to be fair, I think for instance the performance for me in the game week were Truffert and Hinswood. Hinswood, he actually upset me because watching the Chelsea game, he had a gilt-edged one where Sanchez had flopped in goal, and ball came out to him, and he'd done a Kai Havertz special, proper pea shooter, and he ended up being saved on the line. But he redeemed himself. He did get another goal. However, if he had got that one, I'd have won the week. Not that I'm bitter or anything like that.
Well, you knew it was a bad news when you saw that, Welbeck scores in the 89th minute. You thought, oh, okay, Hearts has got this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Squeeze out a little goal for. Anyway, I'm not hating. I'm not hating. I'm gonna let it go. Do you know what I mean? Well done, Hearts. Well done.
Indeed, especially in his birthday week as well. So, not much more else you could ask for, right? Sun, FPL, and bragging rights. But I'm sure, Hots being Hots, you won't be happy.
That's for sure. That's for sure. But anyway, like always, people, please, like, subscribe, share. The support obviously is always loved, always appreciated. We are winding down to the end of the season. We've got some guests hopefully lined up between now and the end of the season, which will reveal when the time comes. But until next time, truth be told, we're out.